This video is sponsored by Millinote.
All right, it is kitchen cabinet time. Again, I am so excited to get the bank of lower cabinets in. This is gonna make the kitchen actually start to look like a kitchen, which is awesome. I've already built the carcasses. I built all the carcasses in one video, and I've also done the fridge surround. And we're gonna take some of the design elements from the fridge surround and apply those to the lower cabinets. We've got a trash cabinet, we've got a sink cabinet, we've got a bank of drawers, and some other odds and ends that are gonna go into it, plus some new hardware that I've never tried before. The whole kitchen is being made out of white oak. I got a fresh shipment from Woodworker's Source, so we're gonna start by milling that up.
It feels like a pretty big luxury to have this much white oak in my shop. I'm really excited to put it to good use though. Thank you, Woodworker's Source. All this material was shipped to me directly. This stuff is beautiful. I milled it down so that it was 3/4 of an inch thick, and I cut all of them to length to be used as the top drawers for all of the cabinets. They're all gonna get this louver detail, which will be milled to match the refrigerator surround. Once I have the first louver routed out, I then set up for the second one. Last time I did this, I found out that the easiest way was to just put a piece of tape down where the fence was and then move the fence forward and use that tape as a measuring surface so that you set it up in the right spot. I cut out the excess tape and then I'm ready to route again. When designing this kitchen, I was thinking a lot about my history as a sculptor, and what I remember in sculpture is that shadows are very important. Shadows define your figure, and in this case, I'm using these louvers to add shadow lines throughout the kitchen to add a bit of texture and interest. Now, I'm offsetting the louvers to the lower side of the drawer because there's going to be a shadow from the overlay of the countertop that I don't want to completely cover up these beautiful louvers. With the louvered panels made, I can turn my attention to one of the bigger glue ups, and I'm using the Rockler panel clamps for this, and I'm making a glue up that is larger than I need at this time. These panel clamps are great for these large glue ups, and I'm gonna use part of this, a majority of this, on the island that I'm building, and I'll show that off in a future video. These panel clamps, I get lots of questions about whether they're as good as everybody says they are, and I am sponsored by Rockler, but I have to say that this is one of my favorite things that they have invented. It's made large panel glue ups a whole lot less intimidating, and they come out dead flat. If you do order anything from Rockler, make sure you use AlmFab at checkout, and that will get you free shipping. With the drawer panels out of the clamps, I can clean them up by scraping off the loose glue and running it through my thickness planer. After that, I cut all the panels down to length, including the island panels, and I also cut down the louvered panels so that all the lengths match. Here you can see all those grain matched beautiful panels, 6 of which are gonna go on the kitchen island, and 3 of them are gonna go into the set that we're making right now. So I stored the panels for the moment, and now I can start in on gluing up carcasses. I mentioned this before that all the carcasses were pre-made in a previous video, but a lot of them didn't get glued together because I had to store them. This is the trash cabinet. It's the first one to go together. It went together easy. However, the sink cabinet is a little more complicated.
22 there, just fine. Okay, so the sink cabinet is complicated. I mentioned this when I built it in the other video, that the sink cabinet is hard to build without knowing your sink dimensions. And I've since figured out the sink. We really want an undermounted sink, so it'll actually get glued underneath the countertop with like a metal flange. The problem with that style sink is that something like this is you just can't use it. You can't use a cross brace like this because it takes up so much of the volume inside of the cabinet. So having to rethink some things. I'm trying to fit this in, which is a sponge holder, and I think this will actually go after taking some measurements. But that means that I can't put a lot of structure in here, so there's a lot of decisions to be made, but I think I'm puzzling it out.
Now this solution may seem very obvious now in hindsight, but it took me a little while to come up with what is actually going to hold these top edges together. And what I decided to do was to inset this piece of oak that's going to act as like a door stop for the lower cabinet doors, and it's going to be a brace that holds the whole cabinet together. Once I got that sorted, I could assemble the rest of the parts, and then it just went together the same way as the rest of the cabinets. I've got a nailer strip on the top and the bottom and the back side, a slot for the back panel, and then the other side panel just sits on top. The hardest thing is getting all those dominoes to line up. I had a question in the carcasses video about these pre-finished panels and whether glue sticks to them. No, not in the least. It makes cleanup super easy.
All right, that should work out. I'm still waiting on some hardware for this drawer, but the drawer is built. As you can see, these are the three main cabinets that are gonna make up the long wall in the kitchen. We've got a trash cabinet as well as the sink cabinet and one for just odds and ends. This will go to the right of the sink, and then the trash cabinet will actually go on the other side of the oven. But I wanted to line them up right next to each other and make sure the carcasses are square and they're looking good, which they are. So all three carcasses are built. Now I have to turn my attention to the panels that cover them up. So I have some panels built for this cabinet, but these two still need panels, and the panel size is getting kind of large. We have been doing some pretty big glue ups of white oak, solid white oak, and I'm starting to get a little squeamish about expansion and contraction. The larger the glue up, the more it's gonna expand and contract. So my plan is to make the larger panels out of plywood that's veneered with white oak, and then the smaller drawers that go up top, those will be out of solid wood.
So there's benefits and drawbacks to using plywood. Plywood's a lot more stable, but I am gonna have to edge band all of these panels, and there's always a risk that I can sand through a veneer, so I have to be very careful about that. I'm also concerned about matching the color of these panels. I was very careful with which panels I picked out, but the difference between veneer and solid wood, it can be noticeable. I'm hoping that the Rubio Monocoat, which has a bit of stain in it, will help them blend together. I like to make my edge banding a little bit on the fat side. I make it 1/4 inch, and then I trim it back to 1/8. I'm then going to chamfer all these panels, so these pieces are gonna look pretty much imperceptible, except for to woodworkers who know exactly how they're built. Speaking of the chamfer, I set up a chamfer bit into my palm router, and then I delicately set the fence so it does not cut into the plywood. If it were to cut into the plywood, that would be really bad. With the edge banding complete, I can start installing the hardware and the doors for the sink cabinet. Using a Rockler Jig-It guide, I can pre-drill the holes for the clips so I can install the doors. And now for the mystery hardware. I've never installed one of these tip-out trays before. This is actually soft close, which I didn't even know was an option, but it is. And check that out. They've got a little gas piston in there, so that's what allows for the soft close. Kind of a cool little mechanism. All I did was follow the instructions that came on the box, and I didn't really struggle too much with this. You just have to screw it in. I did have to raise these up a little bit. I found that they were a little bit too close once I had the weight of the door on it. But beyond that, they went in pretty easily. One thing that I did have to alter was I had to cut a little chamfer on the back side of the panel, but that was easily done at the table saw. Mounting it was a little bit complicated, mostly because it's just hard to screw it in from the back, and the little catches want to move forward. But eventually I got it. It was a little low. I shifted it up slightly off camera, and then I could attach the screws for the back tray. This slides on and off, I'm guessing, so that you have the ability to clean it later.
So in the first kitchen cabinet video, I talked at length about my design process, how I designed each cabinet, and all that was involved in that. But trust me, there is a lot more to a massive house remodel than just making 3D renderings. There's tons of odds and ends that I have to manage. I have bids from different contractors, half-finished drawings in my sketchbook, folders filled with digital documents, and a ton of notes on my phone. Honestly, it's become very chaotic, and tackling this entire house feels like I'm climbing a mountain sometimes. So I've been trying to find a clean way to organize this project, and that's how I discovered Milanote. Milanote is the sponsor of this video, and man, am I glad that they reached out, because I'm telling you, this tool is a game changer. Milanote is a tool specifically designed for creative projects. It's a super intuitive workspace that allows you to drag and drop all those scattered project elements into one convenient hub. Track progress, collect inspiration, and communicate your vision seamlessly. I've been crafting mood boards for every nook and cranny of this house, uploading sketches, and even drawing directly within the app. And let me tell you that collaborating with my wife, Ashley, has never been smoother. I, as a visual person, tend to struggle with communicating my vision until the project's actually done. Ashley has been very patient and trusting, but Milanote lets her peek into my thought process and leave feedback, which is great. For example, in the board that I created for the kitchen, I have the latest renderings, a to-do list, kitchen inspirations, links to the hardware that we're buying, appliance specs, and more, so that she can actually see what's going on in my head. But Milanote isn't just for home renovations. It's an incredibly versatile tool that can enhance any creative project, from furniture designs to brainstorming video concepts or even planning your dream vacation. It's user-friendly, whether you're lounging on the couch with an iPad or sitting at your desk. And the best part is that Milanote is available for free, so check out the link in my description and give it a try. Big thank you to Milanote for sponsoring this video and providing a tool that is bound to become an indispensable part of my creative workflow. Now, let's get back to the build.
When I milled up the drawer panels, I cut them to width, but I didn't cut them to height because I wanted to match them to the mating cabinet. Now that the sink cabinet's pretty much done, I can take the correct measurements and trim these down to the right size. I trimmed the bottom panel first, and then I can lay that directly on my tabletop, put some spacers in, and then lay the next panel on top of that and draw a line exactly where it needs to line up. This way I can be assured that it's gonna look perfect once it's all installed. I then chamfered all the edges, much like I did with the other panels, so that everything matches beautifully. And then I can start screwing them in from the back, but this didn't go according to plan.
Yep, should have known. Don't push it too hard, Michael. Then they break off, and now you gotta deal with it.
So that dense white oak really did not like the screws that I used, and when I went to tighten it a little bit more, it snapped clean off. Fortunately, I had enough meat left to clip onto it with a pair of vice grips, but unfortunately, my trouble didn't end there.
Again? Are you kidding me? Okay, these are garbage. Another one. 2 in a row. All right, this is round 3. These are stainless steel screws. If these don't work, I don't know what will.
I guess third time's a charm. The stainless steel screws seem to work, although I was kind of stripping off the heads of them, but we'll ignore that for now. I installed the rest of the drawers and I could add in each panel, and it was just a rinse and repeat from there. Add in spacers, screw them in from the back, add the next drawer in, and then more spacers. Now it's time to turn my attention to the trash cabinet, and I made the decision just to build the mechanism myself with some drawer slides. It's mostly because I made the cabinet about an inch shorter, so I couldn't buy hardware. But it's fine. I'll figure it out. Since plywood isn't a reliable thickness, I like to set up the slides and the 2 panels in and then take my measurement from there. Just happened to be a perfect 12.5, but usually it's something weirder than that. I cut my panels down to 12.5, and then I can check to make sure that they fit right. You don't want these to be super tight. What I've found with these style of drawer slides, you want a little bit of slack, but not too much, and then they won't clip into place. Once I had the fit dialed in, I can edge band those pre-finished panels with a bit of maple and wait for those to dry. Once they're out of the clamps, I trim them up with the flush trim bit on my router and add a bit of finish to the top of them. You're never gonna see the front or back side of this because of the drawer panel and the back side. So I used pocket hole screws to hold this rectangle together. Now, I was operating on the theory that this was the right size. It's really hard to measure a tapered trash can, and honestly, this is the largest size that I could fit into the cabinet. I was a little nervous because all the other kits out there use the same trash can, but they have a wider cabinet. So I was hoping that these would slot into place. It was definitely a snug fit, but they fit. So I'm gonna count that as a win and start installing the drawer that goes up above. Now, I made all the drawers in another video, and if you want to see the process of making these drawers, go check that out. But I figure you guys have seen me make enough drawers to not include it in this one. With the drawer in, I can set up a spacer piece below, and this is going to evenly set each slide on either side. I screw in the left side first, and then I can remove that spacer piece, slide it over to the other side, and then screw in the right. I attached the other half of the slides to the trash can mechanism, and I approximated the height as long as they're matching on both sides. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I just don't want the trash cans to scrape the bottom.
Great.
Very happy to have the trash can cabinet functional, and then I can attach the panel that I made previously, and this was easy to just screw it in from the back. And again, I did the same thing with the upper drawer, keeping that consistent theme of the louvered white oak panel. And even though it seems like this thing is done, it's not quite. I was talking with people on Instagram, and they had some really good suggestions of putting a panel in between the two drawer slide sets so that the stink of the trash doesn't invade that drawer up above. And I thought that was very smart, so I quickly made a panel and screwed it in from the bottom. And now this cabinet is basically complete aside from some drawer pulls.
The cabinet pulls just arrived and they're awesome. I'm really excited about them. So you'll notice that I'm not going to route in the pulls like I did in the refrigerator cabinet. And we're not doing that on the lower cabinets because you'd have to route them sort of divoted in, and I think that's gonna catch a bunch of dust and debris. But these are gonna have a very similar look. Once you place them on top, they're gonna create a shadow line that's gonna look very similar to the routed in pulls. I think it's gonna be really nice. Now, there is one problem though, and that's when we get to these drawers, because the way that the drawers are set up, I can't slot these in or screw them in. So I'm going to have to remove all of these, route out a little slot in the back, and then insert them. So time to take it all apart again.
I will spare you from having to watch me disassemble the entire thing, but I took off each drawer panel and I made this little jig that is a pretty straightforward jig that is just the same exact width and depth as the handle back. And then I can use a templating router bit to template out that section. Now it leaves some rounded over corners, so I have to follow that up with a chisel, which is honestly pretty fun because I love any excuse to use some hand tools. So I totally could just overlay them on top, but I thought it would look a lot cooler if I inset them from the top down as well, so they're flush across the top of the drawer. So that's what I did, and I think it really took it to the next level. I figured that while I had everything disassembled, it was probably actually the time to put finish on everything. So I gave it all a quick sand. I had to sand the louvers because there's just kind of little marks left over from the router bit, and it looks a lot better if you sand them up. I also took the time to cover up any nail holes or flaws. This is a trick that I shared in my last video, which is a tips and tricks on how to fix problems as they arise or how to cover up flaws in projects. I'm really proud of that video. If you hadn't a chance to go take a look, go watch that video, and I'm sure there's a couple tricks in there that you probably haven't seen before. For the finish, I'm using Rubio Monocoat 5% Mist. I'm using it throughout the whole kitchen, obviously. It's got a little bit of stain in it, which I like. It keeps kind of the raw color of the wood, and it'll stay consistent for a longer period of time, and it's gonna help unify all the disparate parts of the kitchen. It's a wipe-on, wipe-off finish. It's really easy. I put 2 coats on it, and it's ready to go. I let all the cabinet parts dry for over 24 hours. I think it was actually more like 3 or 4 days. And then I'm ready to add on the drawer pulls, which I'm so excited to see what these finally look like. One thing that I learned from all the broken screws was that I need to wax my screws. This is an old-timey technique, but it makes sure that your screws have less friction, which means that they're less likely to break off. And my experience with cabinet hardware is a lot of times they don't send you very expensive screws. So here's hoping these don't snap off. I promise that there is an update video coming soon on the house. There's been a lot of progress, and one thing that we did was we put in floors, and we also have put in the toe kicks. They're perfectly level and ready to go, so all I have to do in the shop is build a couple of toe kick facades. I edge banded these in the same way that I edge banded the cabinets, and I left them a little bit long so that I could bring them into the house and trace them out so that they fit perfectly. After the toe kicks are trimmed and finished, I add on some clamps and then screw them in from the back side. I like this technique of a floating toe kick or a separate toe kick. A lot of people will use integrated toe kicks, but the problem is you have to level every single cabinet. So instead, I've leveled the toe kicks, and so I can just plunk each cabinet on top, and they should be perfect. And now the moment of truth to see if these things fit as well as I think they will. I added a couple of cleats to the bottom of the trash cabinet, mostly because it's on its own and I wanted to make sure it was nice and stable. I then screwed it into the studs in the back and could move on to the bank of drawers. That slid in without any problem, and so did the sink cabinet. I temporarily removed the back panel for the sink cabinet because there's a whole bunch of plumbing back there that I need to account for. There's also electrical, and my electrician showed me these boxes and I thought they were brilliant. I'd never seen them before, but you can actually set the depth after the drywall goes in, which is super cool. I meticulously measured all the elements inside of the cabinet and then brought those measurements back to my shop so that I could cut out that back panel. The oscillating saw does a great job at cutting out the hole for the electrical, and then I used a couple Forster bits for the water pipes, and then for the drainage pipe I used a hole saw. Now I like to use the hole saw backwards first so it doesn't tear out the grain, and then I run it forward and make the final cut. Hopefully it's all in the right location.
Not gonna lie, I'm pretty proud about that. First shot. Nailed it. Look at that.
Pretty proud of myself, but not out of the woods yet. I knew I had this one appearance panel on the side, and this needed to be scribed perfectly to the wall so that it fit and had the right reveal in the front. So scribing is one of those things that it just takes a lot of doing it to be good at it, and I find that the more I do it in like a day, the better I am, but I don't do it that often. So it makes me a little nervous, but I took my time and did it a couple times. I brought it in and out of the house and just slowly, incrementally worked my way up to a good fit. I cut out a notch at the bottom for the toe kick so that it lines up nicely, so that if we're running a vacuum or something like that, we don't get dust captured in this corner. I edge banded it. I edge banded it a little bit proud because I think that looks better, and then slotted the piece into place. It fit like a glove, super happy with it. Now all I have to do is put the drawers and doors back on and prepare for the beauty shots.
I am incredibly happy with how this turned out. I love the louvers. It's the kitchen that I had in my mind, and I'm excited to move forward. The next video is gonna be on the little tiny end cabinet. That thing is under 6 inches, but trust me, in a tiny kitchen like this, I need every bit of storage I can get. So we're gonna build that out next week. I've actually already started it. It's a really fun project. So make sure you're subscribed if you wanna watch more from this series. I've got a playlist right here. Big thank you to Milanote for sponsoring this video. And as always, a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best, and I'll catch you in the next one.